introduce our speaker, there's just a couple of little housekeeping things. First of all, if you enjoy the program tonight, and I'm sure you will, if you were fortunate enough to be here a few months ago when Steve Taylor gave the talk on poor farms, I'm sure that this one is going to be just as fascinating. So if you really enjoy the program and if you're really generous, we have a little lucite box up there, and we really appreciate a little donation. It helps to offset the cost of renting the hall. So just something to think about. On Tuesday, September 17th, the Historical Society is going to have a fundraiser at the Sharon Rest Stop in the northbound lane. So if anyone loves to bake, or if you have a tree with apples or pears or something that you would like to donate, we would love to have your donations. And the person that you would want to talk to is Roy Black in the back, standing up in the yellow shirt. So if you would like to help out with that, Roy would be happy to talk to you about that. Speaking of bakers, we could use more bake. As you know, at the end of our program, we always have refreshments, and probably could use a few bakers. I hate to call on the same people all the time. And so if you feel that you would like to do that, please see me after the program and give me your phone number or your email address. Let's see, Lanny, where are you?
Right here.
Lanny wanted to say something about Lanny is one of the newest members of the Board of Directors of the Hartford Historical Society.
So the Historical Society had some puzzles made up that we're trying to sell to raise some funds. And this is of the Woodstock Railroad. This is our first puzzle, and depending on how the sales of this puzzle go, we will make other puzzles. We had idea of doing puzzles of downtown Weber Junction, 494, some other historical things. What's interesting about this puzzle, being Dewey's Quechee Golf, but what's interesting about it is that this came off from a postcard, actually. And if anybody can probably read it, it says Dewey's Mills, Quechee Golf on Woodstock Railroad at Dewey's Mills, Vermont. And what's interesting about this is that the postcard was spelled D-E-W-Y-S. Now, that's incorrect, but we took it just as the way the postcard was, which is the interesting thing about this. So, and we're selling these for $15, and we have a bunch of them, and we have them here. If you'd like one, please see us, and you can go and put this together. We're going to get together. A couple of us from the board have talked about getting together and putting one of these puzzles together and having it on some cardboard to display, but we just haven't got around to it. So if anybody's got around to it out there, let me know, and I'll be happy to take it off your hands. So.
I understand there are 350 pieces, is that correct?
345
Oh,
pieces.
25.
345
Okay.
pieces.
So if anybody's looking for Christmas gift ideas, you might want to consider that.
I'm really looking forward to seeing one put together. So.
Okay, and I also wanted to announce our next program will be held on November 14th, and we'll have a speaker from the Vermont Speakers Bureau, and he's going to talk about Levi Allen, the black sheep of the family. And he really was, he was a royalist in the Revolution. So you can imagine what headbutting there must have been in that family. So I think this should be a very fascinating topic. And now the person that you've all been waiting to see, we are very happy to once again have Steve Taylor with us. Steve is going to talk about growing up and growing old in the Upper Valley area.
Oh, good. Yes, sir. Well, thank you for inviting me back over to Hartford. Good to come back to. It's good to be. I consider it on home territory. You know, it's only 8 miles where I live from here, and have very fond affection for anything to do with Hartford, White River Junction, and everything. That idea of a puzzle, that sounds like a terrific fundraiser. I hope it really succeeds. Don't get me involved in puzzles. It's beyond me. I can't put together those things. I don't have the patience I see these people putting 1,000 pieces. Good God, spend the whole winter working on them. I don't know. I talked to one lady. She got one of the real complicated ones, and she got it all done, and it was missing one little piece, and she couldn't get it done. And it was some outfit out in Colorado. Wow, she got hold of them out there, and they said, "You take a camera, you take a picture of where that piece is missing, because we want to see it. And we don't know why that happened." But we'll send you a replacement piece that'll fit right in there. By God, it's just what they did. They didn't charge her anything. It was amazing. I was really, really amazed. Anyway, since I was last here, I'll catch you up on one of the things I've been working on is doing an update on the oral history of Plainfield. Back in 1974, we did an oral history project in Plainfield. We interviewed 45 different people, and the last one of those folks died 2 years ago. But from them, we had memories that extended back to the 1890s, and of course the turn of the 20th century was a period around World War I. And so we had, a wonderful archive. We had a gentleman who at the time was in his 90s, but he remembered going to a Plainfield town meeting about 1894 and what it was like, and it was pretty hair-raising, really. They had sawdust on, he told me, they had sawdust on the floor, and they were selling raw oysters, and they were dispensing shots of whiskey from the back of the hall. And he said they would start with the school business at 10 o'clock. And he said by noontime it was like a bunch of young bulls. They want to knock each other down. Must have been pretty rowdy, pretty rugged. But anyway, we blew it. We didn't do it in the 1990s when we should have, and so we missed the generation that came through the Great Depression and most of the World War II greatest generation type people when they were numerous and we had lots of them around. But we've been right at it, and we've got about 45 done. We got another 15 or 20 we're going to be doing. Of course, in Plainfield, a lot like where you are, a lot of the people were not born there. They came in their early adult life, but they've been there now 40, 45 years, but they have terrific memories and have a lot to add about their own. A lot of these people I've known all my life, and I had no idea some of the things they had accomplished in their life, or some of the problems that they'd confronted, overcame cancer, or, things that were tragedies, and I really didn't know much about. But they open up and they tell the stories. It's wonderful. We interviewed a guy who, he's 97 years old now. He fought at the Battle of the Bulge. Had vivid memories, recollections of that. He and his buddy pitched a piece of canvas on the side of their tank, and during the night, an artillery round came in and killed his buddy, and he got a bunch of shrapnel in his body, and he was evacuated to England. They patched him up and sent him right back into combat. Just those stories are just fascinating to record. But for these people, when they get to the end of the interview, I always say, tell me, compare and contrast the Plainfield when you first came here, or from your childhood, with what it is now. And there's a common theme that goes all through it, and it traces to, and several people put their finger right on it, it goes to the movement of the Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center out of downtown Hanover to Lebanon. And that did more to change Plainfield probably than anything else that happened in the last 50 or 60 years. And here's an illustration. The last year I was town selectman, 1978, we had 4 physicians that lived in Plainfield. Now we have over 80, you see, plus all the people, the technical people and the nursing staff and all these accounting people and all these different related specialties that they have to run that institution. So Plainfield has changed a great deal. I had a teacher, he retired a couple of years ago. He started teaching in Plainfield in 1978. He said when he started, he'd look out in a classroom full of kids. There were 5 or 6 kids there that needed a winter jacket. He said now he looks out, when he retired, looked out on a classroom full of kids. most of those kids have got 5 or 6 winter jackets. You know, I mean, it's a change. You know, it's just it's here. It's all around us here in the heart of the Upper Valley region. Well, anyway, I put together a little talk here and ask you to give me your attention, and maybe we can have a little discussion towards the end. And as you heard, talking about growing up and growing old here in the Upper Valley. I was born over at Hitchcock, 1939, and grew up here. And out of my 79 years, more than 75, I have lived here. The other times I worked for the newspaper down at Portsmouth for 3 years, and I had some time in the Army. And other than that, I've always lived right here in the homeland. And so what I'm going to do is I want to talk about a half a dozen themes about the changes that I've seen in my years here. And many of you I know will share, and you will have pretty much the same experience, pretty much the same take on what I'm talking about, because you've experienced it as well. So I'll start off, first of all, I talk about the environment of this area and the dramatic changes that have taken place. They're amazing changes. First of all, it's the closing in of the forest. There's so much of the land in my lifetime has reverted to forest. That's because Mother Nature wants everything around here to be trees. And you know, you don't mow your lawn all summer. By Labor Day, you got little seedlings about that high, and you don't mow it for 3 years, you need a chainsaw to clear your land. I mean, go get your lawn back. So that reversion, the abandonment of pastures and forests and meadows, and you know, the shrinking of agricultural activity that they were created to support has been very, very dramatic. Fields around Plainfield that I mowed hay on in the 1970s got trees 30 feet high, or houses. You know, it's that. Second great change in the environment around here is the cleanup of the river. When I was a kid growing up, children were forbidden to go near the river. It was filthy. It was a sewer. It was a sewer. We didn't have wastewater treatment plants. Hanover, Lebanon, Hartford, Windsor, they had pipes that just took the sewage straight into the river. And the tributaries were just as bad. There was little brooks, and people didn't have any septic tanks. They just had a pipe that went out into the brook. And it was horrible. I mean, just wicked. I'll tell you, folks, the first time I ever saw a condom, I was 4 years old. I asked my father, well, what's that? He said, oh, it's to help protect people's health. Anyway, but, and then there was industrial pollution. The E. Cummings leather tannery in Lebanon was famous. On Friday afternoon, they dumped out their vats and right into the Mascoma River. And we could smell that odor, that sulfurous odor, clear down in Plainfield, 8-10 miles south. That water was going down the Mascoma River and right down the Connecticut. And up here in South Royalton was a chicken slaughter plant. And the blood, they just let it go out in the river. And, you know, it was awful. They used to say in Claremont, the Sugar River, they would say, when my sugar goes down the creek, all the fishies go eek, eek, eek. Well, it was pretty bad, you know, industrial pollution as well as, you know, domestic, residential type pollution. Oh, it was pretty bad. Well, that cleanup took a while, but by golly, an awful lot of progress was made. Both states finally said, you know, you got to have a septic system. And that was mainly encouraged by house inspections. You know, they check a house, you know, somebody wants to sell it, and they have an inspector come. Well, the first things they do now, they check, see if the septic's working. And you got to have it shipshape around Mascoma Lake. The septics for many years were just a 55-gallon drum stuck in the ground. Well, you can't sell a cottage at Mascoma Lake unless you got a approved septic system that you got a state permit for. And so that happened all over the place. And then towns like Hartford and Hanover and Windsor and Hanover and upstream, the bigger towns up there began building these wastewater treatment plants. and cleaning that sewage up and making it decent, clean water. And so look what it's done. You know, the Connecticut River now is a wonderful resource. You go on a hot day down at Sumner's Falls, you go in that access road from Heartland, and there's all kinds of people in kayaks and canoeists and all kinds of things going on. You know, it's wonderful what they were able to achieve in terms of, we were able to achieve in terms of having a clean stream and attracting lots of recreation. It's a wonderful thing. And, you know, tubing on the White River and all these other side streams too. Good fishing and so on. But that reversion to forest, though, it really gets me in the heart. I feel sad, I grieve about it, to lose these views. And I'll tell you the absolute worst example in my neighborhood is the Maxfield Parrish Place. It's this estate where Mr. Parrish painted his entire career. And it is all grown up. It's owned by an investor out of Boston, and he's been trying to sell it, but you can't see a Scutney from there anymore. And with Mr. Parrish's studio, where he painted, just be able to look out at green pasture, ledge outcrops, tall oak trees. Forget it. It's poplar and sumac. That's all it is. It's a jungle. And it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that view and that landscape back that he knew in his lifetime. Places for sale. If you're interested, go on down and take a look. But that's just a stark example. So anyway, wildlife. Big changes in the wildlife pattern around here. When I was growing up, when I was a kid, we never had coyotes. Never heard anything about coyotes. Oh my God, that was out in Montana or someplace. Well, we have coyotes. They're a firmly established part of the environment here. We never had wild turkeys. Wild turkeys everywhere. You know, you got to slow down on the road, throw on the brakes. There's a bunch of them walking across the road. And the deer population has surged in recent years, and I think it's two reasons why. A lot less people are hunting, and there's a lot of land being posted, so it's being put off limits for hunting. And so the deer thrive, and the deer are becoming more suburbanized. I've got a doe and her two fawns from last year and her baby from this year. They just yard up within about 50 feet of the back of my house. They're out on the lawn at night. You look out, they're out there. They love to eat the shrubbery around the house, you know. But they become suburbanized. They're almost fearless. They'll stand and look at you in broad daylight. So anyway, we're getting more deer. Beaver, of course, come back from near extinction. They're everywhere. We haven't seen any moose lately, but 8, 9 years ago we did have some moose around, and they would show up here and there. And then a peculiar Upper Valley critter is sort of in remission, or whatever you want to say, and that's wild boar. All right, and the wild boar came from Corbin's Park, that vast game preserve that's on the east side of Plainfield in Cornish, west side of Grantham in Croydon. It's a private game preserve, and it has a fence all the way around it. And it was stocked with wild boar, and when it was created in the 1890s, the hurricane of 1938 knocked down a lot of that fence, and wild boar escaped. And they're just the most aggressive nuisance that you can think of in terms of agriculture. And it's such that by 1946, 47, in the town of Plainfield, we had a bounty on anybody could shoot a wild boar. Town will pay you $40. And we got some pictures. Our town calendar a few years ago, we had a picture. There's 6 or 8 guys standing with their rifles. I think they had 10 or 12 wild boar strung up on a timber overhead, and they were that numerous. But what they would do, it made so you could not grow potatoes. They just root up the potatoes, and, waste them. And corn, they go down a cornfield, just tear it all up for the hell of it. And so they were a real pest nuisance. But they got hunted almost into submission. And then in 1953, my first summer job, working on the Great Forest Fire inside the park, They cut the fence here and there to move equipment in and out, and some wild boar escaped again. And today, they've long since fixed the fence, and there's still a feral herd of those animals out, but rarely seen. In the last 10 years, I haven't, on any land that I have any responsibility for, seen any sign of wild boar. But they're around, they're still around. Once in a while somebody shoots one. I'll tell you about, I used to raise pigs. I always have a couple of pigs, and we kill them in the fall. Neighbors all do the same thing. The last batch of pigs we had, I said, that's it, I don't want any more pigs, no more. Well, I was commissioner of agriculture, and I went out and visited a guy at his farm one time, and he said, oh, God, I got these piglets, and nobody wants to buy them. Would you take a couple of them? And no, I'm all done with pigs. Well, he gradually wore me down, and he sold me these 2 little black piglets like that. And I had them in a gunny sack. I took them home. And I put them in the old pig pen. Next morning, I went out. They're gone. Where the heck I couldn't believe it. They got out. I just couldn't believe it. Well, the little pigs, they didn't go far. They were around in the neighborhood, and people began to see them. Well, what it did was attract about 8 pickup truck loads of heavily armed men who were convinced there was a wild boar sow right in the area, and they were going to shoot it. But anyway, a neighbor caught the piglets. They were in his garage eating sunflower seed, and he slammed the door on them, and we got them. I put some more boards on the pig pen, and we raised them up, and we slaughtered them, and I cut them up, and I took the ham bacon to Liberal Beef down at Claremont to be smoked. They caught on fire down there, and USDA went in and condemned all the meat. And about 4 months later, we got a little check for like $38 from some insurance company. Then I said, that's it. Somebody's trying to tell me something about pigs. No more pig. But anyway, so that was that. Another thing we did is pretty dramatic that we were able to accomplish is we shut down the dumps, solid waste dumps. Every town had their own dump. People used to say, oh, it's wonderful social institutions. You go, you see your neighbors at the dump. I never got any kick out of that. I always remember going to the dump, and the wind would be blowing the smoke that way, and we'd grab the barrel, run over, and dump it. And before you get back to the back of the truck, that damn smoke would change right around and come and get you. And you'd have to go home and take a shower because you smell so terrible, But we cleaned those up. We got rid of them. The Lebanon dump burned 24/7. And if you drove to Plainfield, you went down 12A, there was no way you'd smell that dump clear to Plainfield. You'd open up both windows after you got through the smoke, but your car would still stink. But that was the way it was. Okay, let's move on to transportation. When I was young, if you lived on a town road, you lived on a bad road. The roads were terrible. And the town struggled to just barely get them opened up and functional. It was so bad in Plainfield that a couple of weeks in April they had mud season vacation because the roads were impassable. They just couldn't do it. The River Road, that was where one of the bus runs. They just say, forget it, we're not going down there, and just get buried in the mud. And but a lot of other roads were in pretty poor shape. And then, of course, you had thunder showers in the summertime would wash out culverts. And a lot of the culverts were simply made out of hemlock plank laid in like that and one on the top. That was a culvert they'd wash out. Might be days before they got you fixed and got you out going again on that road. And so the town struggled, and gradually they upgraded roads and improved them, built them so that they would last and survive. And then, of course, World War II introduced us to four-wheel drive. And so right after World War II, a lot of people wanted to get Jeeps. That was a big thing, and some people were buying these war surplus military vehicles. I remember those. But it was a long slog, but the roads got improved, really. And, today, the towns, Hartford, Plainfield, any place, under tremendous pressure to remove snow fast and make those roads passable. Because all these people in healthcare, when their shift opens, they got to be there. And they can't, there are no excuses for being late for work. You can't say, well, it snowed, I'm late. Too bad. You got to get there. And so the pressure is on the towns to get those roads opened up. Of course, we've seen the reconstruction of some of the major highways, and of course the interstates coming, all of that. That's all happened in my lifetime and has had profound impact on everything to do with life around here. Employment. We talk about employment. When I was a kid, when I was young, you worked on a farm, you worked in the forest, or you worked in the shop. You know, what do you do for a living? I work in a shop. Well, what shop? Might be Cone Automatic Machine in Windsor. Might be a shoe shop in Newport or Claremont. It might be the rubber shop. That was Goodyear Tire and Rubber. They didn't make rubber there. They made neolite for soles and heels. But we all called it the rubber shop. And then a lot of people worked on the railroad. And those jobs are all long gone now. But in my childhood, a lot of people, a railroad job was a pretty decent blue-collar kind of job. Be a section man or on a train crew, whatever. Lots and lots of people around here did that. And then you had a small kind of professional class of people that might be connected with the college or one of the hospitals. But that was a very small cohort compared to what we have today. The rise of the medical centers and the whole healthcare industry around here really caught fire in the 1960s, and the employment, you know, as a percentage of the overall workforce here has just grown and grown and grown. And it's really given us a much more diverse economy. Because back when we were with shops, we were talking about woolen mills, maybe in Lebanon, or the Hartford Woolen, or Goodyear. They were often unionized and frequently were having strikes. And so that was always a kind of a disruptor to the local economy. But the improvement of roads and the diversification of our economy around here has had tremendous impact on a lot of things. But one thing that really stands out to me is how it facilitates commuting, long commutes. I had the misfortune to be in Dartmouth Hitchcock for a couple of days last summer. And I just chatted up the nursing personnel. And where do you live? I live in Whitefield. I live in St. Johnsbury. I live in Brattleboro, Randolph. You know, they're driving 60, 70, 80 miles to a good job. I said, I can't believe it. That's what they're doing. And there are people that live around here that commute to Concord and Manchester. And that Dartmouth coach bus takes people who work in Boston. They're now leaving, having a bus leaves at 4 in the morning. You know, it's incredible what good highways and people's willingness to tolerate long commutes. That is a big change. It used to be go from Plainfield to work in Windsor, well, it was about 5 miles. That's about as far as I want to go. But not now. Good God, that's an easy commute. You can almost walk that, you know, but you go vast distances. So the home life has changed a great deal in my lifetime. And I have seen the transition from wood heat to coal to fuel oil to propane, and now everybody's getting hot to trot for heat pumps. All right, I don't know about Hartford, but it seems like a lot of people got heat pumps, and they're talking how great they are. But wood heat, that was a big part of the economy. People cutting wood, selling wood, or if you did your own, you spent an awful lot of your leisure time cutting wood. Often people burn slabs from sawmills. Cutting wood soaks up huge amounts of time, and you know, had all kinds of side benefits like chimney fires. You know, good chimney fire, that was always a cause of excitement. We had a neighbor, he'd have chimney fire every single winter. And they said, well, God, why don't you clean that chimney out? No, it'll burn out. It'll be all right. Don't worry. And my God. And he said, after it's burned out, it's perfectly good. Yeah, well, I don't only get all excited. But the problem was, a lot of the roofs in those times were wooden. They were shingles. And boy, those hot embers get on a roof and get the roof going. Running water. I would say probably in my childhood in Plainfield in the 1940s, I bet probably only about 55 or 60% of the homes had running water. For bathrooms, they had the two-hole. And then a lot of them might have a hand water pump. or they might have, if they were really advanced, they might have a well up on the hillside and a pipe coming down, and the water would run continuously in a little box, kind of a sink in the kitchen, keep it from freezing up. The water would run. And other people would dig a well, and gradually electric pumps came in as we electrified. 1946, I would say in Plainfield, probably the town was about 70% on the grid. It was electrified. But that happened after that. Virtually everybody got electric power. But so running water, that was quite a breakthrough, and having a flush toilet and all of that. Telephone was pretty well established in my childhood. We enjoyed having a telephone that we could call our neighbors on, and telephones were a source of considerable entertainment value. We had party lines in Hartford. I know damn well they did. We had them, and they had the operators were down in the big building down there. It was on Gate Street, I guess it is. And that was, a lot of people went to work. A lot of women worked there. They'd graduate from high school, become an operator. And for Plainfield, the exchange was in Windsor. And in the east part of Plainfield is Meriden. And we had hand crank telephones. You spun a crank when you wanted to place a call, and they sent an electric charge down the wire to Mrs. Chellis's bedroom, and then she'd jack in and say, yes, number please, you tell who you want to call, and so on. But of course, when we were teenagers, we spent a lot of time listening in. Well, there was a famous line in Plainfield, 599, and I think there were 10 parties on that. 599 W1, W2, 3, 4, and M1, 2, 3, 4, so on. But there were two ladies that used to tie up that line, and they were terrible. They wouldn't get off, but you'd listen in on them. And they didn't talk about much of anything. One would say, yeah, and there'd be a long pause. Well, I don't know. Well, it don't look good. No. And finally they'd say, you boys get off the phone. You boys hang up or we're going to call the police. Well, there wasn't any police, we knew better than that. Anyway, but if you happened to be on a line where they had teenage girls and boyfriends and they were fighting, that was real good entertainment. We enjoyed that. Electrification, as I said, came slowly in the 1930s, the villages and along the main roads, but back on the countryside, it was later. It was a feature of the 1940s, and it would be transforming. In my time, I'm amazed at how much bigger lawns have gotten. Remember how we used to mow lawns with those push lawnmowers? Oh my God! I remember getting paid 25 cents an hour to push a damn lawnmower. God, it was terrible. And then came power mowers. Now we got all these guys riding around with these F350 pickups and big trailers and a whole bunch of these big machines on the back, and it's all contracted out. And people don't have that pleasure anymore, I guess. They just hire it done. Anyway, shopping. If you live in a small town, you'd go to White River, Claremont, Lebanon. That was where we did our shopping, or Windsor. But we pretty much could live out of a general store. Most villages in this area had good general stores. And even in the bigger towns, they had small markets before supermarkets came. White River, I remember clearly now, there was a little A&P in downtown, but then there were several small markets. There was the Progressive Market. That was on the south end. Izzo's.
Renault had one of those markets.
Renault, okay. And there was a guy named Payette had one over here on the point, right? Public Market. And there was Ahar Brothers. Am I getting this right? And up in Wilder was a Wilder Fruit. And they called the guy that ran it John Bananas.
That's right.
Right? Yeah. And
Real name is Yapa.
there we go. All right. And there was a store in Quechee, Capron. Is that right? I remember those. All right. Well, anyway, that's how we could live out of those stores. And the one in Plainfield, not only sold groceries and cheese and bologna and hamburg and stuff like that, but they also sold paint nails, overalls, boots, kerosene, things like that. You know, they were, but gradually, of course, the supermarkets came in. First National, and then some of you will remember Super Duper. Remember going to the Super Duper market, and they gave green stamps. You bought a bunch, you get a big reel of these green stamps. And they have your little books, and you paste them in, and you could go to the green stamp store, and you could get a toaster.
You had to get a ton of those damn stamps to get a toaster.
That's right. Oh, yeah, yeah. It was just a gimmick to get you to keep coming back to that store to do that. But the Super Dupers, the headquarters for Super Duper was in White River. It was Cross Abbott Company, and they were downtown there, right in back of the post office, right in there. And then later they built this great big building out here. And
Super Duper in White River was actually where the co-op is today.
That's right. Yep, yep. When I was in college, well, actually for 6 summers, I worked at Swift & Company on South Main Street, and I saw the transition. This would be from 1957 to 1962, the transition in the distribution of meat. When I first started there, on Monday morning, there'd be 4 rail cars waiting out back at 5:30 in the morning, and we'd go out there and we'd unload those rail cars, and they'd open the door on the rail car like that. Over on the left would be hindquarters hanging. Over on the right would be the forequarters. And we'd take them off the hooks in there, take them out, rehook them, and push them into the cooler. And then to send them to the stores, there'd be a store wants a side of beef, and we'd take the hindquarter and a forequarter and break it down into manageable sizes and truck it right to the store and haul it up a step or whatever into the cooler and hang it in the cooler. And that's the way it was. By the time I left, that all went away, and it went to what was called, is still called, boxed beef. The meat packers figured out it made more sense to cut off the fat and take out the bones out in Nebraska and take the remaining muscle tissue and put it in big cartons and send those east. But the unions, of course, the meat cutters unions on the East Coast, they fought that and fought it. But finally it took hold, and that's the norm today. But it was a fascinating transition, really. And we had general stores, wonderful general stores, all up the White River Valley. I remember, oh my Lord, we'd go up there with a big load of stuff, and South Royalton, Chelsea, Bethel, all kinds of fascinating places. Anyways, so go on to home life. Before television and after television. I mean, it's sort of like before Christ and after Christ here. Before television came, we had radio. I remember radio. We had a radio, and we had an antenna outside. Went from the corner of the house over to a tree. Periodically, it would get hit by lightning, and it would, it would melt it. That would be there. Put up another piece of wire, and the radio. We weren't any stations around here. We have a decent radio. Could bring in a Boston station or New York. There weren't very many stations that would come in up here, but we'd listen to the radio, and newspapers. I think the White River paper was called the Landmark. Anybody remember that? Okay, good. And Lebanon had the Grant State Gazette, and Windsor had the Vermont Journal, and they were reading matter. It came out mostly once a week, and they were filled with what in those days they called personals. Today a personal is, an off-color kind of thing, but in those days they were fascinating. Say, good Lord, Mr. Roy Black was a Sunday caller at the home of Stephen Taylor. Well, all right, so we knew, and but sometimes if you were on the inside, you knew, hey, wait a minute, something's going on. Mr. So-and-so was at the home at Mrs. So-and-so on a certain day, well, but those were the backbone. I mean, it have, so-and-so, they had a limb fall on their roof, and they are trying to fix it. would tell us right in the paper. That was good. So that was it in terms of home life. Radio, listening on the telephone, the party lines, all that. But one of the things that was very much a part of life in those times was a visit. You know, go visit somebody on Sunday afternoon. If you had a car, hop in the car, we'll go visit Roy Black. Let's go over and see what he's doing. We didn't call ahead and find out if he was going to be there. It was almost guaranteed he's going to be there. And we'd go over and go up to the door. Hey, well, come on in. You know, people are happy to see you. Or somebody come visit you. That was accepted. Now you feel like you have to get an appointment to go visit somebody. You know, you got to call, make sure it's all right. And so we did a lot of that, travel, and not far usually, but go visit on a Sunday afternoon. But the coming of television changed everything. It just changed everything. And my illustration of this is in Plainfield again. Tracy Spalding ran the general store. Well, he ran it, but his wife and daughters did all the work. All right. But Tracy, he liked to sit up and back, smoke cheap cigars and pontificate. 1953, there was no television around here, nothing. But Tracy got a franchise to sell General Electric television sets. All right. Well, one day a box truck came, unloaded a whole bunch of TV sets. These great big sets in those days, you remember how big they were. These cartons, and he had them all in the aisles between the grocery shelves. Oh, God, Tracy lost his mind. What's going on? And he took one of them, set it up on top of the meat case, and he plugged it in, and all it did was go like that. Oh, my God, you know, this is crazy. What the hell is he thinking? Well, April 1954, Channel 3 Burlington and Channel 8 Mount Washington went on the air. And in 2 weeks' time, people were lining up to buy Tracy's television sets. And they weren't cheap. I remember they were like $500. That'd be like $4,000 today. And people were going over to Windsor to get loans to buy those things and bring them home. But, you know, when you got a TV set, you were only halfway there because you had to buy an antenna. Remember? Those things up on the roof. They had a motor on them that twist them around. Kids were always playing with them. And they blow over, hit by the lightning. Oh, my God, they were terrible. But anyway, that changed everything when that TV came. You know, instead of putting on like the 3-act comedy play and charging 35 cents admission to raise money for the PTA, that all went away just like that. Everybody's staying inside, watching television, and that's all people want to talk about. Oh, did you see Jackie Gleason last night? Did you watch Hopalong Cassidy? You know, all that stuff. That's what people were obsessed on that. And of course, the biggest one of all that I recall most vividly, everybody talking about the $64,000 question. That thing. And it turned out later it was all rigged. You know, it was all fake. But boy, it had everybody just gripped. So television was a big, as they say today, a big disruptor. Town governments have seen vast changes. I would say until really, I'd say if modern times begin in the 1970s in terms of local government, in small towns, selectmen had vast power and respect. They may not have been beloved, but they did have a lot of power. And certainly my experience as a selectman would confirm that. We were virtually the police for the town. You know, somebody's dog's barking in the middle of the night. We didn't have any police to speak of. We had some constables, I'll mention them in a minute. We call up selectmen, and so-and-so dog's barking, I can't sleep. What are you going to do? Well, call them up, see if you can get the dog, bring the dog in, could you? You know, that kind of thing. Oh, sometimes there'd be some domestic problems, and the woman would call up and say, my husband's drunk and he's acting up. Can you come over here and calm him down? You know, that was what selectmen were expected to do. And and there were no freedom of, open meeting laws. Nah, we didn't have any of that. Most of the business in Plainfield by the selectmen was conducted on the hood of a pickup truck in front of the post office. You know, we just got together, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. No minutes kept or anything. It just got done. It happened, you know. And so that all changed, and the business of town government became much more professionalized. My wife, I would be at work, and we had a bounty on hedgehogs in New Hampshire, 50 cents. And the kids would shoot hedgehogs, and you had to bring in the head off the hedgehog to get the 50 cents. And these kids would show up at the door, knock on the door, and they're holding up a hedgehog head. And they want 50 cents. She'd run and get them the 50 cents, and you take that out there and a shovel and go and bury it right over there. I don't want to see it. That kind of thing. That was 19th century government really at work. Anyways, social life. Towns thrived before TV with most of them had a good balanced social life. The Granges were important. Sometimes, often there'd be a men's club, a women's club. Home demonstration agents would come from the university and put on programs. 4-H for the kids. Scouts, not so much in rural towns, but 4-H was very big. Community activities, plays, bazaars, food sales. Oh my God, always having food sales. Raise money, gonna have food sale. I remember my wife, they'd call up, oh, won't you cook for the food sale? We gotta have some stuff. And it's gonna be Wednesday at 9 o'clock. So she'd make something real nice and take it. And, about 8:45, go back 9:30 to see what else they had, maybe buy something. What happened to my cake? Where'd that go? Wow, the women that were running the food sale, they'd take all the good stuff and set it out back. They paid for it, but not much choice after they got done picking it up, high grading it, And dances, oh my God, dances were so important. Round and square. For years and years and years, Hartford had the Island Park up in West Hartford, a dance hall. And we had a band that played from the 1940s until the 1990s called Woody and the Ramblers. And the guy's name was Leon Woodard. And he was a mechanic at Gateway Ford. And work all day at Gateway Ford, change their clothes, and he and his bandmates, they'd go play. They'd play 5-6 nights a week for years in the late 40s and the 50s. I mean, how they did it, I don't know, but they were tough. They'd play, and then they'd adjourn to the Polka Dot and have a big meal at midnight, and go home and sleep 5 or 6 hours, get up, do it again, and live on candy bars during the day. They were amazing. It was fun. In Plainfield, we had dances every Saturday night, and the band was called the Gay Notes, and we had a caller, his name was Walter King, and he called square dances. And he'd do 3 square dances, and they'd dim the lights, and you have what they called a waltz, and just ballroom dancing. And then, when the dance had been going for about an hour, always they'd have a polka, and they'd play the Bear Barrel Polka. And everybody would get off the floor, and Harold and Isabel Hoisington, who lived across the street, would come. And they were very big, heavy people, but they're very light on their feet. And they'd dance that polka. Around they'd go, it was beautiful. But then when the music stopped and it was over, they go home, go to bed. And that was a fixture of the dance. Traveling shows, there were a lot of these traveling shows. I remember one came, they were called the Range Drifters. They came and they played in the town hall, and they charged people to come in. And one of them, I remember, they said, on the poster it said they got a singing dog. Oh, we all got to go see that. Well, all they did was put this poor little dog up on the stage, and they'd play a string on one of their instruments that would hurt the dog's ear, the pitch. And he'd cry, ooh, like that. No, geez, that was a big deal. Christmas parties. We had a great Christmas party one time. I may go a little off color here, but you've got to hear this story. Christmas party. And Santa's supposed to be coming. All the kids are there, and they got a Christmas tree, and is overdue. And the minister's up front, and he's saying, he said, Santa's in Windsor, okay? And then we sing a Christmas carol. Still no Santa. Santa's coming through the covered bridge. No Santa. Sing another Christmas carol. Santa's in Cornish. We sing another Christmas carol. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Finally, the doors burst open. In comes Santa Claus. He's stomping his feet. And, ha, ha, ha. Well, it's obvious Santa's had too much to drink. Santa sees a little tyke standing over here, he walks over to that kid and he says, "How are you, you little shit?" Oh yeah, my God. Yeah. Everybody enjoyed that. That was fun. Yeah, I could go on and on about social life, and there's a lot of other fun things that we did, and we had a good time. But golly, in my teenage years, it was pretty grim. If you wanted to date a girl, what you could do, you could go to the movies. But I never figured out why. But the White River Theater, the Lebanon Theater, and the Hanover Theater would all have the same movie. And the movies would be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then they'd change. A different movie over the weekend, but the same damn movie. Well, you couldn't go to Claremont, it was the same thing down there to have the same movie. I never figured it out. But if you, after you saw the movie and you wanted to go out another night, well, about all you could do was go parking, right? Well, in those days, you'd go parking, nobody bothered you. But today, you go parking, cops are around and rap on the wall, "Hey, get out of here, you know, you can't be here." You know, they won't allow that. So those were the days. Anyways, okay, my last category is the change in population and the demographics. You know, from 1860 to 1940, this whole region lost population, and people had gone away, and the population declined. And but after World War II, it gradually began to rebound. And of course, the coming of the interstates and the diversification of the economy around here, all that built it all up. But I think we still have the same problem today, and that's the loss of our youth. In my childhood, my teenage years, you know, a lot of them males, they go into service right off, and many of them would not ever come back. Others would get jobs at Pratt & Whitney down in Hartford. Girls would go to beautician school or whatever, and a lot of them would just go away. And then and the ones that went off to college, often, they went to college and they didn't come back. So we've always had an export of our young people, and I think it's still going on today. I got 3 of my grandchildren, grandsons have finished college. One works in Providence, one works in Portsmouth, the other one works down in northeastern Massachusetts. You know, they're down there. And they'll tell you the biggest obstacle around here is affordable housing. There isn't enough for young people, so they got to go somewhere else, which is too bad, as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, loss of youth, the coming of the interstates changed. As I said, the land became an investment vehicle. 1963, the year I got married, if I'd had any money, we should have bought some land around, buy it for $10 an acre, woodland, Cornish, Plainfield. It was $10 an acre. Huh. Well, today, look what it is. I mean, it'd be thousands. That was because of this access to wealth and money from down country. And then I guess the biggest change of all, I think, in terms of demographics, has been the political change. This was rock-solid Republican country until about 20 years ago. And, you know, Windsor County, they had these 3 senators. They were like senators for life, Republicans. They got elected year after year after year. On the New Hampshire side, it was Republican. Hanover, delegation to the legislature, always Republican. Stalwarts, Lebanon Ward 2, which was around the mills there, they'd send 1 Democrat. But if you were a Democrat when I was growing up, you kind of were considered like the town drunk, you know. But in the last 20 years, it is completely flipped. It's completely flipped now. I mean, look at the Democratic stranglehold on the Vermont side, and this district on the New Hampshire side, from Lyme, Orford, right down towards the Mass border, that's all Democrat now. So that's a pretty profound change. I'm going to wrap it up with just a few vivid memories of the olden days, and I'm sure many of you probably had very similar experiences. The farm culture, we still have a few farms, but nothing like we used to have. Farm kids were, today a farm kid in a school is almost a celebrity. Kids want to come out and see what it's all about. But farm kids back then, a lot of us got picked on. World War II, I remember vividly. I was a little kid. I remember blackouts. They thought that the Germans might fly over and they'd take a look down and see Plainfield, and if the lights were on, they'd drop some bombs on us. But we'd all turn off the lights or pull the shades down, and we had rationing with shortages of gasoline, rubber tires, sugar, meat, and you got coupons to get those staples. You had to make them last for a month, and they were always having these drives, scrap paper, scrap metal, those kinds of things. That was really part of the war effort. And I read later that a lot of it was, they didn't really need the newspaper, but if it got the whole populace behind the war effort to think you were part, along with the soldiers and sailors, you were part of the war effort by putting stuff up for these drives. I went to a one-room school for my first grade, and then two-room school the rest of the way through elementary school. You know, so different from what kids would have for the experience today. I remember it was a big deal, probably in the third or fourth grade, they started up a hot lunch. That was quite a thing. I have a hot lunch. And I remember it was in the basement of the Plainfield School, and there were two ladies that served it, and I can remember those menus. They didn't change much. You know, Welsh rabbit, beans and hot dogs, you know, sometimes beef stew. On Fridays it would be salmon pea wiggle. I remember that on saltines, right? And dessert, my chocolate pudding, gingerbread, a little dab of whipped cream on top, Jell-O. You know, but that was great for a lot of those kids. That was probably the best meal they got. And you know, I look back fondly. Chop suey. Oh God, we have chop suey every week. I think we have chop suey. If you lived in a rural area, you were probably on an RFD. And RFD was an interesting institution, started in the early 20th century to give people in rural areas the same service that people who lived in a village near a post office. It was a post office on wheels. You could buy stamps, you could send a package. The RFD guy would come by once a day, 6 days a week, and bring things like baby chicks, packages of bees, and you know, things like that, delivered right to the door by the RFD man. And that was a wonderful thing. I spoke about general stores, how I love the general store. Swimming holes, no pools as such. Most towns had swimming holes. If you had a real good one, you had a chain hanging off a tree limb, and you could swing out and cannonball into the water. Nice picnic spots, usually in a pasture. You know, there weren't much for state parks where you'd go for a picnic. You'd just go up to somebody's pasture, climb through the fence, and have a picnic right up on a ledge somewhere. And most of those pastures are all trees now, nothing there. My earliest recollection, I think I've got it right, would have been 1942. My father went to West Lebanon to go to the feed store, which is now West Lebanon Supply. It was called the Sunshine Feed Store in those days. And he took me out back and lifted me up in the cab of a switch engine. It was a steam engine. And he set me up there. The fireman and the engineer was standing there. And the door, or whatever you call it, the gate, I guess you'd call it, open. And there's that flame and that heat and those red hot coals. I mean, I remember it so clearly. And it had to have been 1942. From what I've heard from other folks, that after that they went to a diesel electric switcher, and so that engine went away. Coming of dial phones, that was a big breakthrough. One thing that went away in this time I'm talking about was kind of the disappearance of great town meeting orators. Boy, we had some old stem winders, and some other towns, every other town had them. And very often they were people that weren't terribly educated, but they knew how to organize their thoughts and give a real convincing talk. They could switch public opinion. You know, they could sway people to vote against or in favor with their words. You don't see those much now. Town meeting now has gotten to be more like a press conference. You know, if somebody stands up and they want to ask school board, how come such and such? Rather than getting up and saying, I think what you did was wrong, you should have done this, or we shouldn't do that. They don't do that. They want to fire a kind of a good grouchy question. Anyways, anyway, I guess we've got this pretty well covered. Farm culture, oh God, I talked about that. Draft horses, oh no, boy. I saw the transition from draft horses to tractors. That's been pretty dramatic and interesting. I got to, I think my first farm job was driving a horse, raking hay, and the horse was smarter than I was. We'd just stay right on the pathway. I was supposed to go and get the end, turn around, come back. It was perfect. Pitching hay with a fork. Oh boy, loose hay. Pitch it up onto a wagon, and then you get to the barn. You pitch it all up through a window. They always stick me up in the mouth, dusty, covered with chaff and prickers and every other damn thing. Oh, awful. Unbelievable. And the tractors gradually took over. Anyways, I don't know, my God, I'm running out of time here, but logging in my time, it went from using horses to snake out logs out of the woods. Then came little John Deere crawler tractors, putt, drag them out, and then came the log skidder, and now you got these enormous machines that just cut the tree down. And, you know, you don't see lumberjacks anymore. These guys are heavy equipment operators. They sit in the cab, maneuver levers, and take down trees, and cut the limbs off them, take them to market. That's amazing. All right, I'm out of gas, I think. Anybody have a question they'd like to throw at me, and we can chat. Good.
I was just going to mention something.
Yeah.
You did touch on movie theaters, but do you remember Aled Graves? He owned the Lyric Theater, the White River Drive-In.
Yep.
And years ago, before I was born, my folks lived on Taft's Flat. They rented the house. They tore that house down to create the Haven. And the next door neighbor was Aled and Eileen Graves. And he was a native of Whitefield, New Hampshire. And his family had a theater up there.
Yep.
And he came to White River Junction in 1923. And he bought a theater in White River Junction called The Crown. And he was such an astute businessman that within 3 years, he bought a lot on North Main Street because he was going to build a new theater, something that was a lot nicer than The Crown. And so he built the Lyric Theater. But when he sold the old theater, there was something in the deed that said that that building could never again be used for the showing of motion pictures. That was a stipulation. And anyway, he built the Lyric Theater. And back in the late 20s and the 30s and probably early 40s, there were vaudeville shows that would come. And one of the shows that would come was Lou Walters and his Review. And Lou Walters had a gambling issue. And one time, he was up in Canada with the troupe, and he gambled away whatever resources he had to come to White River Junction, so Graves had to send him money so he could bring the troupe down. And so we did. And they put on a show. They apparently would put the show on before the movie. And Lou Walters has a very famous daughter that's still living. You know who I'm talking about?
No.
Barbara Walters.
What do you know? Golly, that's pretty good. Oh, how interesting. Yes.
And the other thing about
Yeah, go ahead.
him is Lou Walters had 3 nightclubs, all called the Latin Quarter. There was one in Boston, one in New York, and one in Miami. And Barbara actually grew up in Miami. That's where her childhood was. And on her famous interview shows, a lot of those old timers are people who used to come into her father's Latin quarters.
Oh, interesting. That's fascinating. John?
You mentioned the interstates coming quite often, and do you remember the politics of that, of what route they were going to take?
Absolutely. Yep. That was one of the great stories of the 1950s. The way the interstate highway legislation in Washington that was crafted was basically that Washington would lay out points that they wanted connected, like Boston and Springfield, Boston and Montreal, okay? And then left it up to the states to determine the exact route that it would take, each of these roads. And in the case of Interstate 89, it was to be an extension of beginning in Boston, coming up to Concord, and then going towards Montreal. Well, if you know now, you get to exit 9 in Warner. There's a big supermarket there and McDonald's and some gas stations. That highway goes straight like that. It could have gone to the left over there. People in Claremont and Rutland argued for the Interstate 89 to go south of Mount Sunapee, come through Claremont, cross the Connecticut River, go to Rutland and up the west side of Vermont through Middlebury and Virgins towards Burlington. And people around here said, oh, no, it's much better to have it come through here. And so it was a big battle, and it really never was decided finally until about 1962. And you know the route it took. But people say, oh, how did that happen? How could it have been a slam dunk that it would come this way when you had all that lobbying going the other way? Well, here, I'll give you simple. New London, James Cleveland, congressman, okay? Lebanon, Norris Cotton, United States Senator. Lebanon, Lane Dwinell, governor. White River Junction, Carl E. Kelton, chairman of the Vermont Highway Board. And Dartmouth College. Dartmouth College generally gets what they want, all right? And so the rest is history. And look at the difference between Claremont and Rutland. Both of those are classic Rust Belt communities now, flat on their back, all the pathologies of the Rust Belt. You know, high teen pregnancy rate, cancer rates, heroin addiction, all of these things up here. You know, we hear, you know, in Lebanon, we got too much growth, we got to slow it down. You know, I mean, Claremont would kill to have a quarter of the growth that's occurred up here. And that's what it has. One other thing, I'll wrap it up with this. Tunbridge Fair starts tomorrow. Wow. Tunbridge Fair in my childhood and growing up was always called the Drunkard's Reunion. It was a wild and woolly affair. And that went way back in history. My father used to tell about going to the Tunbridge Fair in 1927. And down by that little cemetery, at that time, this is right in the middle of Prohibition, was a hearse. A hearse with Quebec plates on it. And it had a coffin in the back, and they were selling whiskey out of that coffin. All right? Now, I mean, that's incredible. But what happened with the Tunbridge Fair really is quite an interesting story in and of itself. And I give them credit. They tell it right in their little section in one of those buildings where they talk about the history of the fair. A new minister came to town about 1960, and he said, this is a disgrace. You know, our children are seeing people staggering around drunk, you know, open container everywhere you look. You know, it's out of control. It's bad. And we've got to stop it. And in about 3 years, they cleaned that whole fair up. They got rid of the strip tease. They got rid of all this soft stuff. And it's now one of the best fairs in New England. It is a wonderful family-type fair. And they've done a marvelous job. It's just great. Anyway, yes? Okay, last question.
Do you remember Ward's department store back in the 40s?
Ward's?
They made change with the little cups that,
Yep.
they put the money in the cups and
Vacuum would take it up to the cashier. Yep. Houghton Simons in Claremont had that as well, as I remember. Yeah, I don't think Kolodny's ever had it. Some of you may remember Kolodny's.
Areas in Lebanon.
Correa's had it in Lebanon. Yeah, what a great thing, you know. Now about the only place you see that is Branch Banks. That's,
Could
you know,
Could I say one last?
please do. Yep.
I talked about Alan Graves and the movie theater, but he also founded the White River Drive-In.
Yeah.
And he and my father were very good friends, and so my father always had a pass to the Lyric and a pass to the Drive-In. So one night, my folks went to the movies, which they didn't do very often, but this particular night they did, and the next day saw Alan downtown. And Ellen said, "You enjoyed the movie?" And Dad said, "No, I actually didn't care much for it." But he said, "We went to the drive-in a few nights ago," and he said, "I didn't care for that movie either." But he said, "It was a pretty good show in the next car." I'm going to ask Mary if she'll explain it to me.
Yeah, oh, that's cute. That's good. I love it.
Very
Okie doke. Thanks a lot. Yeah. All right, good show. Yep.